Welcome to the Menstruality podcast, where we share inspiring conversations about the power of menstrual cycle awareness and conscious menopause. This podcast is brought to you by Red School, where we're training the menstruality leaders of the future. I'm your host, Sophie Jane Hardy, and I'll be joined often by Red School's founders, Alexandra and Shani, as well as an inspiring group of pioneers, activists, changemakers, and creatives to explore how you can unashamedly claim the power of the menstrual cycle to activate your unique form of leadership for yourself, your community, and the world. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. We're exploring Black cyclical wisdom through the lens of the life story of an extraordinary woman who left a profound legacy of cyclical heart and body intelligence. With the wonderful Dr Cre Dye, who serves as the Menstruality Justice and Inclusion Educator at Red School. And as you'll see, she's an incredible storyteller. And I personally left this conversation feeling so deeply moved, as if I'd just spent an hour sitting at the feet of a great sage, and I hope you feel the same. So Dr. Cre has served her local, national, and international communities with heart, mind, and body activism for over 25 years as a mental health therapist, yoga teacher and trainer, and university professor. This is part 2 of my series of conversations with Cre about the cyclical wisdom she received from her grandmothers. So in episode 138, Indigenous Cycle Wisdom and Menstrual Rituals, we heard the story of Cre's First Nations granny, and today we're hearing what she received from Mama, her Black grandmother. We hear how Mama grew up picking cotton in Mississippi, was widowed young, then left an abusive relationship, and travelled alone in the 1960s with her 8 children to go on to foster over 60 children and become this force of love in her community. And how through every single moment of adversity she faced as a Black woman, she found her way to claim her rest, to rise up, and to embody hope in the face of hate. I feel so grateful to be able to share her story with you all. Let's get started with what Black cyclical wisdom can teach us about hope, peace, and belonging with Dr. Cre Dye. Well, good morning, Dr. Cre Dye, by the sea, in heaven over there. How's Hawaii feeling, and how are you feeling cyclically today?
You said the word heaven. I usually say that. I say, why would I be upset if I'm in heaven? And cyclically, cycle day, I want to say 24. So I like the way that I've been coming into my time of retreat. And what a beautiful place or location to retreat.
Yeah, just to paint a picture for our listeners, Cre's sitting on a balcony with the beautiful wide blue ocean behind her and lush greenery all around, and you look so relaxed as well. You look so happy and in your body and relaxed. And I'm happy being because any day I get to sit down with you is a good day.
We have a good time, don't we?
So yeah, how's day 24 feeling for you?
I was feeling my crossover days, and it was interesting because I told myself that it seems like every single time I experience crossover days, it feels different every single time. And so I just sit in it. I sit in it with curiosity, and I do a lot of writing, but I also ask myself to be quiet because I don't want to say things that just come out of like this space of like la la la. That's what I call it. I feel la la la.
I relate on day 24.
And what does that mean? I don't know what la 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 means.
I do. I get it. And I feel like last time we spoke, you were saying that you could feel like you were heading, perimenopause was happening.
Yes. Last time I got 48 days. Another time I got 21 days. So I've always been a regular bleeder, regular cycler. And so lately it's like, when are you coming, girl? I'm going to wait for you, but I definitely energetically still experience those seasons and those crossover days and the void and all of those things. I definitely, and it seems like they're bigger than
And like
usual.
extended inner autumn, is that what you're experiencing?
Yes. But I've really taken note every single phase, every single season, sister. I say, you're only extended because it's necessary. So what do I get to receive? Right? I don't resist it. I don't reject it or say, enough. It's just, oh, you're extended because there is more for me to see here.
Even if it's really uncomfortable.
Even if it keeps me away from my preferences. So that's what I've been talking a lot with my own children, is that may you accept when it's not your preference, and accept it with curiosity. You right? That discomfort, and how, like my daughter was just telling me yesterday, she's like, Mom, this is uncomfortable and I just want to get away from it, this feeling. And I was like, just see what it has for you first.
Shani often speaks about this, about that menstrual cycle awareness is this practice of leaning in, getting curious, embracing is a strong word. I mean, turning towards what
Yes.
is with curiosity, and then seeing what it's a gateway to, what it's a, which is different to toxic positivity.
And that's the tricky part of, like, sometimes I think, can we accept that two things can be truth at once? Can be true at once. So I accept that this is uncomfortable, but I also accept that this is good. Right. And can I move in that two things can be true at once? Because many of us believe that, no, it's uncomfortable and that's it. But can we believe and accept that, yeah, these two things are here at once, just like two emotions can be present at once, and they can just be fear and excitement, right? Or sadness
I feel
with
like
joy.
this is like the whole of the teaching of the second half of the cycle is really death exists. Death exists.
Yes.
We will dissolve. We'll dissolve menstrually, we'll dissolve out of these physical bodies one day. And that's what we have to deal with in this life. Somehow we have to reconcile that fact. And the menstrual cycle gets, we get to practice it a little bit each month.
Guess what? That brought me to a statement from my grandma, from Mama. And I know we're here to talk about Mama today. Death exists. Let me tell you what Mama used to say. Mama she's just this brilliant being that she would say quotes or say things that just came from her heart. I always call it her heart wisdom. Like, she had a sacred heart wisdom. And Mama used to say, you just brought up death. She used to say, we say something like, no, well, you got to do this. She say, listen, y'all, I ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die. Those are the two things that she said, those are the two things that I have to do, is stay black and die. Those are the two things. And we used to think, like, this lady, what is she talking about? But if you sit back and think about it, Sophie J, it's like, in reality, that's it. Those are two things that, as a Black woman, that she had to do, that it was inevitable. She was going to be Black and she was going to die. And I think it's the wisdom that came from her. Like, I just sit sometimes with sentences from her, and I place her in a space of, like, a great teacher, a sage,
Can you introduce us to Mama? And maybe through the lens of, well, hang on, back up. So in our first conversation, we were speaking about what inspired you to get connected to your cycle, and where you tracked it back to was your two grandmothers. And in our last conversation, we spoke about your First Nations grandmother and Indigenous menstrual menarche ritual. So it's a beautiful conversation. And then you were saying, and then there's Mama. So can you introduce us to this character in your life?
I would love to. Sophie J, let me say, I remember one time you said, it was at a workshop that you were offering. It was a while ago. And you said 99.9% of all beings on earth follow cycles. And it's the humans, the 0.1% that live outside of natural cycles. And so I'm bringing this back to Mama in this way. I observed this woman living cycles, no matter what was put before her, no matter what was afforded her. It was almost like I observed and learned how to watch her steal away. She had to steal her time of retreat. She had to steal her time of rest, right? She had to steal these things because as a Black woman growing up in Mississippi, a little girl in Mississippi, here's the picture that I always imagine. I was once in her womb, in my grandmother, in my mom, right? And I imagine as a young mom, it was very, during that time, she was picking cotton. She was a little girl who loved education, but at sixth grade, she could no longer go to school. She had to go work in the cotton fields. So young, married, and my mom was the second oldest. So she's this young teenage woman, married very young. And I just imagine being in her womb, and she would have to walk down the street, and like if a white person walked by, she'd step down and put her head down, like those types of things. But the most amazing thing that I think about is how she always would rise. So I think about like how she always would rise up. And so in Mississippi, young mother, birthed 4 children with her first husband. Jim Crow kills her first husband. Just the life of Jim Crow, the South, kills her first husband. She moves up north to St. Louis, Missouri, East St. Louis, remarries, has 4 more children. She's got 8 babies, right? And for a short stint, she lives with an abusive husband. Now, let's remember during that time, like if we're thinking 50s, 60s, 1960s, a woman doing this by herself, 8 babies. She rents a U-Haul truck, the kind that, so a U-Haul truck is a huge truck that it has this slide up door and down, no windows or anything in the back. In the middle of the night, steals away her 8 babies and her, drive up to Peoria in Illinois to get away from this abusive husband. Yes. Wow. You hear me? This woman, like, I'm getting chills because, oh my goodness, right? She takes her 8 babies, moves up there, temporarily living with a sister, and she works at an addictions facility in the kitchen. So at this time, she has 8 babies. And I always picture her. She always talks about how she had to have her baby. She said, I have 2 on one hip, 2 on the other hip, and a couple on my leg, She said, no matter what, I'm making a way. And so working in an addictions facility, in the kitchen, and eventually moving herself up to running the facility with a 6th grade education, and eventually getting her GED. But I always think about what she used to tell me also is that, it's a whole lot of people with book smarts. She said, listen, girl, you go get your education and you have your book learning, but you also have to have your heart learning. Like she said, a lot of people know how to use their brains, but not everyone knows how to use their hearts. Right? And I just feel how fortunate I am to have been guided by such a being that constantly brought me back to my heart. And in that, I think about living in cycles, and I think about the 4 seasons, and in my research and in my writing lately, how I framed it. When I write about my grandma, I write about her season of retreat, her season of rest, her season of rising, and her season, she died trying to still help people and be in relationship with others. And to me, that is her in her cyclical living, where she had to steal away as a Black woman, right? Even with all the things that are relegated to Black women, she had to steal away her ability to process through adversity while holding herself.
And her 8 babies.
And then she remarried in Illinois. And that's the granddad that I knew and grew up with. She had, my Aunt Tasha was the last baby. So she had 9 babies, but wait, that's the thing. Before I was born, my grandmother always had foster children. So I have extended like cousins, and she ended up adopting at least 7 of them, but in her house all the time, in and out the house. I write about this also, just like that experience of being in a household and hearing the caseworker come drop someone off. And I remember just listening to the children in their breath when they would be crying, and they'd go in the room with my grandma, and she would just be holding them. And I always would just listen at the point where they stopped crying and breathing so hard. And I just imagined them in her arms or on her lap, right? Until they were able, her nervous system was able to help calm them. but always had foster children in and out. So it wasn't just the baby she birthed. You know, she had, I call them earth babies. She had all these earth babies. And I see that same movement, that same life living within me. Yeah. Such an honor. So that's the picture. That's who we're speaking about
thank
today.
you, Mama. I'm moved by so many
Yes.
things. One thing then, when you were speaking about watching Mama help these babies to regulate, to co-regulate, and I think about the book that you're writing, Little Nervous Systems.
Yes.
And I wonder, you know, how much did you receive just sort of from osmosis from Mama that now is coming to fruition through this book and through all the work that you're doing with families and children?
I love that you asked that question, because my writing coach, she's constantly, when she'll read a passage that I've written, she'll say, bring Mama into this. Like I'll be writing, and a lot of the wisdom comes from like things that Mama said to me, or things I observed her doing, or just even like my research. So I'm trying to integrate all of this, like ancestral wisdom with neuroscience, with, you know, just some common sense and my experience of being a mother, right? So think about melding, like bringing all those together. And I think that I know that it's grounded in what I observed with Mama. She's my research foundation.
What a muse.
What a muse, right?
And I
What
was
a
also
muse.
touched by when you said she had to steal her rest. I'm thinking of everything that I've learned from Trisha Hersey at the NAP Ministry about Black women and rest and the realities of that in our world. And I'm always aware of it when we speak about rest at Red School and when we speak about rest on this podcast, what that means for different people in our world. And to think of how the radical act of stealing that rest, of claiming that rest, even amidst everything.
I have chills again, you know, that it's so huge. And I remember, like, sometimes I'll picture my grandmother, and I write. I don't know if I've told you this before, Sophie J. Every morning I get up and write, and I call it my morning pages. And it wasn't until my grandmother's funeral did I learn that she used to write. So at church, at her funeral, she was on the drama committee. And one of the women got up and said that she wrote a play. And I thought, I never knew that Mama wrote. So when I learned that Mama used to write, I think about the fact that she was not afforded the space to just have a journal every day and to get up in the morning and write. So that inspires me. I'm like, I'm going to write because she couldn't. So that's stealing away. And I remember one day, and I have it here. I thought about Mama as this young girl, like this little Black girl in Mississippi, you know, and with her siblings. And then that's another layer of, she had 9 siblings herself. Well, 8 siblings, it was 9 of them. But she was in Mississippi and she was dealing with colorism, not just socially, but also within her family. But she was a darker sister. She wasn't one of the lighter sisters, right? And I always imagined like her sitting, and if she could write. So this is something that I wrote, real short words, right? I wrote, and I thought, I wrote about Mama writing this to Black girls. I said, may you not cry for lack of rest. We know you get tired. We support your rest. We know it's less safe for you to be rested. You are worthy even when you are resting. May you not give yourself to the lies of capitalism and white supremacy, because personal activism is social change. No one's going to invite you to rest except you, girl. My grandma would say that a lot of times. She said, you just need to go sit down. Just go take a rest. Like, that's where you gather yourself when you go sit down. Or she'll say, go sleep on it. And she'd always tell me, like, if I get worked up or something's going on, she said, just go be still for a little while. So much wisdom in the stillness. Yes.
When it came to you doing your research, it was around African American women and their menstrual practices, right?
Yes, I've done several studies, Sophie J. So I have one specifically with Black women and their cycles. And then I've looked at this concept of this strong Black woman, like us rewriting that. Like, what does that mean? But really focusing on we must locate ourselves within our research. We write our own stories. We share our position in this world. Before we write about the world, we must locate ourselves. So yes, like I'm
Tell us
passionate
more
about
about that. We locate ourselves first.
that. Oh, locating ourselves and thinking about the stories. Oh my gosh, there's so many writers out there, Black women, that have written about like who else has told our story, who else tells our story, and when they tell it, it definitely isn't a story of strength, right? It's this victimization. Oh, okay, here's an example. I'm thinking about some reading where it was described how in the Victorian age, like white women were seen as like just silly, like little girls, just not wise, just silly little girls. And then you have these colonizers go down to Africa, and the description and the story they told about who these Black women are. You know, they said there's these strong, active Black bodies, these women who are there to birth, and they have on scant clothes, like their clothing is scant. Now, mind you, they're in a tropical environment, so their clothing is definitely, you know, for comfort. And so the story, just from the beginning, like the stories that have been told about Black women and how we tell it would look very different. Just like I think about the story about our cycles. Once upon a time, the way it's been told, but when we tell it, when we talk about our retreat, our inner fall, we don't call it PMS or she's being a bitch, or, you know, we don't talk like that. We wouldn't talk that way about ourselves. So I think about Black women locating themselves and telling their own story. This includes coming to terms with who we are and how we came to be and how we came to do the work that we do, right? It's just so many layers to it. The capacities to cope and tolerate uncomfortable situations, right? Like just we tell our stories from this place of empowerment, not from this place of weakness or victimization.
Or the lies of, like you said, the strong Black woman, the angry Black woman, all the different stereotypes that come from white supremacy. So just to bring back to Mama, how was your research inspired by Mama? As we're talking, I'm like, wow, this is her legacy living through you.
You know what I think about the most? And I think it's something about who she was that sets me apart. I know that every good story starts with hope, right? Every good story starts with hope, Sophie J, right? And people need a story of hope as much as they need food. Yes. And I think about how Mama, that's who she was. Like her voice, her story, her words never was, oh, I'm just tired today, I'm overwhelmed. Her voice to us was get up and do what you got to do. You know, it always was like, you can rest, you take some time for you, but then you get up and you keep going, right? And it brings me to even a few months ago, I was doing some writing and kind of working on this chapter where I was including Mama in it. And I called one of her sisters, her younger sisters, my Aunt Mary. I think my Aunt Mary is close to 80 now. And she said, I was talking to her and I said, you know, I'm just getting information. And she said, I want to talk about your grandma to you. Let me tell you something. She called her B. She said, you know, just all my life, I would call B on the phone, and you get on the phone and you may call her and feel discouraged and feel like life ain't good and you just want to give up. She said, but you listen, by the time you would get off the phone with B, you feel 10 feet taller. She said, you just feel like you could stand up and do anything. So bringing it back to her, like, just, I get to tell a story of hope. That's how that's how the story lives within me. There isn't a story of I can't. That definitely, I've never thought that I can't do something. And I remember her telling me, like, I function from approval, not for approval. When I was created, I was already approved. I'm already all right. Like, she's saying things like that. You already good, girl.
Yes, that worth. That's the menstrual blessing just coming at you all day long through her. You know, I just had a direct experience of this, the necessity of hope, because here right now in the UK, there are riots from far-right racists, and it's fucking heartbreaking. And I just was looking for some hope. And I found this organization called Hope Not Hate. And it's a beautiful organization, and they are The whole community is coming together after these riots in Sunderland, in Manchester, in Rotherham, very close to me. I'm in Sheffield. And the whole community is coming together to clean up the mess, to clean up the mess of all this hate with love and with hope. And they're like making tea for the police officers, and everyone's having chips, chips and tea. That's the love language of the UK, cups of tea. And it's so generative, and I lose faith sometimes, but hearing you speak about Mum and I'm remembering that love and that hope is always stronger than the hate.
Always. Sophie J, I have chills on my soul is in agreement. Do you know that we're parallel? We are the same. We are mirror. In Nashville, when I live an hour north of Nashville, you have the same thing happening where you have these men standing on the overpasses with these flags with the swastika. Can I get it out? Swastika. And they have flags and they're just standing there and walking and marching. Yes. And then you have I see on social media, these large group of people just coming out in love. They're just coming out. They're coming out and just being present in love. And that's it. And I think about that is the only thing my grandma taught me, Sophie J. When I would face challenges, and I faced, going through, and I know it hurt her to hear me talk about, even when I was in middle school, like little racist boys that would throw slurs at me or say things. Even when I grew up into my adult life, she would say, but you be right. You keep your heart right. She always would say that, but you be right. That was her thing, is like, but you keep yourself right. You don't do what they do. You show up as love. You be right. And that's what she constantly would do. She said, because that's who you are. So powerful. Yes. And if I know that, Sophie J, if I know that, like you think about, like I said, a story and how we need a story as much as we need food. If I know that, and I know that type of hope and love lives inside me, and she made it through Jim Crow, Mississippi, and moved up north in abusive, like all these dark spaces that she's been in. If I know that lives in me, why would I not live it out? Right? Even for those communities where, what I've been doing lately when I'm in Kentucky, and that's, the south of the US, extreme racism in spaces like they're going to make sure they wake up violent with their Trump flag and come put it in your face, or they'll put a rainbow flag up and put an X over it, that type of thing. Like they wake up with violence. And so I still think in my mind, how can I meet them at the doorway of their heart? How can I be human first? Right? How can I let love be my flag? Instead of me wanting to, like, what the human response a lot of times would be, we want to show up with our flag, right? And what if love is my flag? What if just me showing up and being interested in them is my flag? And that's what I've been doing lately. Like where I know when I walk into a space and it's like, I'm not welcome. And you know what I do? I just smile and say, good morning. What y'all up to in here? Right? I'm coming with love. You may not energetically take anything from me in this space when I'm coming in love. You may not try to shift me towards your hatred. You may not. And that's what I learned from Mama. I saw it in her, in everything that woman did. I saw it. And it's so amazing to me that she didn't have to do that. She didn't have to.
Yeah, she had 1,000 opportunities to collapse and give up.
Oh, if I told you all the stories that I observed, like even the way some of my uncles were treated, like Black men, and my uncles are these huge, big brothers, big Black men that just when they walk into a space, Sophie J, their existence is questioned. Just because they walk into a space, right? And she had to observe her babies being treated certain ways, and she still showed up with love. She still, even when I remember when one of my uncle tells a story when he was on the football team in high school, and it was an all-white team, and he was like one of the outstanding Black players, and it was his turn to be captain. And he said that he remembers, like he worked hard for it. And at the last moment, the coach says, no, he's not going to be it. He chose his white boy who was younger, who didn't have experience. And just the devastation he felt, and how my grandma had to still be kind to this man while he mistreats her baby, right? Neglects his opportunity. And she still showed up with love. Right? And to be able to process that, to be able to stay healed and whole in that. That's what I think about all the time. How do I maintain wholeness when those type of situations are constantly coming?
And in your research, we talked about this, I think, before our first conversation. You did this qualitative piece of research with 12 Black women. So one of the things that I remember one of the fruits of that research was you recognized that they were coming from a place of disconnection with their cycles, but each of them found their way back to their womb. Yeah.
Every time. I had a list of like what I'm writing I'm writing an article from that work, and I just have a list of how all of these women, even in, like, you think about what we're forced into, they still would find themselves find their way back. And that to me is kind of like that still in a way. Like I'm still in a way. I'm still in myself back. I'm still in my cycle back to me. The story of how I bleed, the story of this experience, I must go get it. And I think about, like Harriet Tubman, through the middle of the night, I got to go get myself, go get the things that nourish me, go get what I already know, but you keep trying to take from me, right?
As a therapist, Cre is trained and certified in a variety of interventions that focus on the integration of counselling, neuroscience, and body-based radical healing processes. 10 years ago, she began a deep dive into menstrual cycle awareness as a tool to support the mental and emotional wholeness of individuals, couples, and families. And now menstrual cycle awareness is embedded in all she does. And on the Red School Menstruality Leadership Program, she offers a beautiful workshop to facilitate what she calls inner change for social change and support us all to work with menstruality in a way that is just and inclusive. The Red School Menstruality Leadership Program is the world's first leadership training anchored in the power and wisdom of the menstrual cycle and menopause. The doors are open for the 2025 MLP. You can find out all about it at menstrualityleadership.com. And we're hosting a live event on September the 25th, all about it. And you can register for that at menstrualityleadership.com. Okay, let's pick up the conversation with Cre, and we're getting right back into talking about Harriet Tubman. For anyone who doesn't know the story of Harriet Tubman, she escaped from enslavement in 1849 and travelled 90 miles alone to reach the free state of Pennsylvania, and undertook 13 incredibly dangerous, hugely courageous missions to rescue enslaved people through a network called the Underground Railroad. There's a film about her life called Harriet. It's absolutely amazing. She's played by Cynthia Erivo. It's mind-blowing. It's really worth a watch. Okay, let's get back to Cre.
And Harriet Tubman is such a figure, in the US as far as for Black women. And how here's how, I don't know if you've got a chance to meet with Octavia Rahim yet.
It's coming.
Okay, so I'm in a session with Octavia Rahim once, and she says this, and Sophie J, it blew my mind. I've never not thought about it. She says, I want you all to think about the type of imagination that Harriet Tubman had to have to be able to say, she's watching her people get killed, and she still said, get up, we gonna go. Like the imagination, the creativity in that woman.
The vision,
exactly. And so there it is again. Why would I not get up every day and tap into my creative powers? Why would I not sit with my cycle and say, what do you have for me on my first day of bleed?
Mm-hmm.
Not believe in what lives inside of me. Why would I not? I can't fathom it. I can't fathom folding when those type of stories have nourished us as women, just period, as women, right? She's watching all these women have their babies stripped from their arms, having her sisters be used as just like a body to birth another body to go work someone else's land. Like she still said, but we gonna go, y'all, come on.
We will be free. And she did it. She did it.
And you know what I think about? I think about all the other women that have done that. And I'll tell you what, I remember, I don't know if people know this story. It was a movie that came out years ago. I think it was like Blindside or something, but it was about this white family that took this Black football player, and he was in high school. And, you know, the story of like the white family saving this bringing in. And I just thought, like, how crazy is that when that's what the grandmas I know do all the time? That's what my grandma been doing since before I was born. Like, that's the story of the grandma, right? That is the story of the Black family, where some cousin coming to live, or somebody, they house burned down and somebody had to come. You know, that's all I know to be. That's how I watch mama live. Like, she's always like, y'all, we gonna do this because they ain't got this, and so now we got to make this happen. You know, that's it. That's the story. And I thought, wow, they made a movie out of that. They need to go drive around like a Black neighborhood. It's happening all the time. That's just what I know to be.
Community was in her blood and bones. It was,
Yes.
and it's in yours. Like it couldn't, what is just how life should be, how life is. We look after each other. We take care of each other.
The belonging, sister, the belonging and the connectedness is as necessary as our breath. A sense of belonging, being seen and heard and valued. That belonging, she instilled that in me.
And that came through in your study too, in your conversations.
Yes.
Belonging was key. Community was key. Community was nourishment in this journey of reclaiming the cycle and the cycle wisdom.
That came through. So many good things have come through the research of just like, in my mind, the way that I approach research is I'm trying to bring humanity back to it. A lot of times you hear about these research and this data and these numbers, and none of us are a number, right? And this percentage, and I'm like, but there's a voice there. There's a heartbeat there. Let's hear the heartbeat instead of the 98%. You know, let's hear about the, you know, just let's hear the humanity in us.
For our listeners who feel passionate about reclaiming this womb wisdom, feel passionate, know that the menstrual cycle has this intelligence and it needs to be at the heart of our world, what would you say you learned from these conversations about how we can all come back to our wombs, to this wisdom that lives here?
Here's what I really, really feel, and I've been really focusing on, kind of like just jotting down, is really what we've always known. And when we quiet down the external noise, right? When we quiet this stuff, these stories that have been given to us, and we just go be with ourselves, I truly believe we're all practicing it in some way. Like I found when working with this last research study, all these women came to realization that I've been practicing my inner seasons, right? I have to go steal my rest, but I get me some, right? And it may not be as much as we would like. It's not afforded to us so easily, but we all have our 4 inner seasons in us. And when we quiet down the story that the world has told us, who we need to be, and we come back to ourselves, I really think like our womb, she's already telling us, our wombs, like our inner wisdom, our inner landscape is already saying to us what to do. And that's truly what I believe, is that when we quiet down the noise, even if that looks like just getting up in the morning and saying 5 minutes for me, I'm going to listen. Sometimes I encourage people that I work with to say, as you start your day, just wake up and just say to your inner wisdom, just say, how are you today? And listen. Place your hands on your womb and just say, how are you today? And just listen. Right? Isn't that simple, Sophie J? But when I tell you all the people that I come across daily that don't just sit still, here's an example. I was supervising 16 of my in the program, in the graduate program, that are training to be therapists. We started our meeting. I said, everybody drop a word of how you feeling right now. And they, anxious, worried, frustrated, they drop their word. And I said, and I want everybody to read each other's words. And I want you to just feel those words as you read them. And then I want you to think about this. In every environment that you're walking into, that's what's meeting you. Anxious people, angry people, worried people. So the first thing I need y'all to do, and this is definitely something for mama, is to know that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you experience in that, it ain't got nothing to do with you. Those people are showing up that way. This is how they're showing up. And so the first thing you got to do is release that idea that it's about you. The person that's burdening you in the car, cursing you, they had that. That's going on with them before you even turned the way they didn't want you to turn, right? It ain't got nothing to do with you. And if we could just, that is like, to me, that is cyclical wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
To see what's mine and what's not mine. I'm
Mm-hmm.
picking up stuff that ain't even mine. Girl, stop. Those people came in here angry. I want to take it personal. No way.
No, you're just exploding my mind a bit. Because as you're speaking, I'm feeling that the momentum that you're speaking about there of sitting in our own authority and claiming our own experience rather than being blown about by the weather of the world. It's the same momentum that you're bringing through from Mama of you can bring your hatred, your racism, your ignorance. And I'm what does she say? I'll be right.
I'm still gonna be right.
Yeah, and I'm still gonna be right.
She said, but you just be right. She
Yeah.
said, like she would say, like, I'm still gonna carry my peace. Like I still got my peace. No matter what you come with, I still got my peace.
So it's like I'm really, you say I think you say personal growth is social justice work or the other way around. Like it's the same momentum that we're working with on the personal inner level, and then we can translate that out to the outer level.
The inner change equals social change.
Yes.
And every moment that I give, I was telling someone this yesterday. If you want to heal your family, start with you. It was someone called me about a relationship a couple of days ago. I said, if you want to work on you all's relationship, just work on you. Don't think, what can I actively do to get my baby back? What can I actively do to get my love back in good graces? Like just work on you. And that will change the dynamics. That will change the both of you when you work on you.
Yeah. And cycle awareness is this wonderful language. It's this wonderful whole universe of ideas and ways of being that calls us back to ourselves, that gives us a way of seeing ourselves, ways of understanding ourselves, and language to describe, to know how we are.
You know what I call this, Sophie J? It's the sacred study of me.
Yes.
Because why do people go to sacred text? They go to sacred text to go learn how to be, how to live, right? How to exist. What better place to study than yourself? What better place to get information about me than me? Do you hear me? What better place to sit? And I tell young people this: you sit and start following your cycle. You start tracking your cycle. And I've even introduced to young men, how they have a 24-hour cycle. Their hormones are shifting throughout the day. And for my son loves this. He's like, Mom, in the morning, I know my testosterone is high, so I get things done. And I know in the evening that there's a shift and my attitude may not be the same. And I said, and that during those times, you don't go into deep thought about anything. You just let your mind relax. You do relaxing things with your mind, right? When your hormone is shifting to where you don't feel so happy or so good, right? But what better place to study than you? You are a sacred text. We all are a sacred text. Our cyclical wisdom is like, it is like the chapters, the words on the pages. It's the story of us. It's a good study.
A good study. I'm thinking about the initiation we have each in a winter when we bleed. That seeing our experience of our cycle as a sacred text really helps to illuminate how that is a sacred temple time. That is, Sunday church time. That is whatever your spiritual religious practice is. And it also to think of menopause then, well, what is menopause in that spiritual context? Menopause is the great pilgrimage home to self.
Oh my gosh. When you literally are power, are your power, right? You at menstruation, you meet your power. And then throughout, the first time in menarche, you meet your power. And then you practice that power. And then at menopause, you be that power. And I'm thankful that I got to experience my grandmother be her power. As I was growing up, I remember, and it didn't get talked about a lot, but if I sit Sophie J and just reflect, kind of hindsight and look at things, I remember when she became to be her power and how her tongue got, I want to say it wasn't sharper where it would attack others, but it was more matter of fact, where this is this and this is what it ain't. This is what it is and this is what it ain't. This is what's not going to be happening. Here's what we not going to do. Doesn't that sound like menopause? Here's what we, that's how I describe my menopause coming up and this perimenopause experience. I feel more of this. Here's what we not going to do, like the way that we give ourselves and we kind of like pacify others, and we just go along and accept things that really deep down inside of us don't sit well with us, and how we negotiate ourselves, right?
How's that going for you?
I'm loving it. And I even think about, here's another mama story. I think about it's really coming into a season of more no, right? That's our season of no, just arriving at menopause. And I remember her saying, you want to see a person's true self? Tell them no. You really want to see how a person is? Tell them no. And I used to think about scenarios of like telling a person no, like they're not getting their way. And whoa, what will you get? Like what will you see when you tell a person no? I've been dropping a lot of no's about, no, thank you. I'm okay not doing that. No, thank you. I'm okay not. Yes, no, thank you. That's it. Just no, thank you.
Sitting here in this conversation with you, I feel so tender in my heart, and so honored to be in your presence and to be in the presence of Mama, of this tremendous being. And I'm also looking out at a world that for Black women is full of medical racism, and what this means for menstrual health. And just to throw a few statistics in here, not that we are the statistics, I'm 100% with you on the stories. We need to share the stories, and there are truths that it's really important for us all to remember so that we can dismantle the systems that are keeping them in place. Yeah, so menstrual health, Black women are 2 to 3 times more likely than white women to develop fibroids. Black women are less likely than white women to get breast cancer, but 40% more likely to die from it if they develop it. Black women are 50% less likely to be diagnosed with endometriosis compared to white women. And they're also less likely to receive endosurgery. And if they do, they're more likely to experience surgical complications. And there's just this ongoing myth that Black women have higher pain thresholds, which has all kinds of implications for birth and for all aspects of health. So this is the situation that we're looking at and that we need to change. And I think this came up in your study. I think some stories came up in your study around this.
Lots of stories. I first think about just the experience of trusting, this experience of trust and Black women going to be supported. And I often say, like, when working with like a service provider, we service people based on how we see them. And so that's where it starts. It's just when a Black woman walks into a space, the idea of like the service provider, how they see that human, like you just said, this threshold of pain that's so much higher, or even seeing her as someone that needs help and is worthy of like due process to work with her until the end. And to be able to even just look at her while talking, and I'm imagining this because women have talked about this. They're sitting there talking about their experience, but the doctor has their back turned or the medical provider is turned away and just question. Like there's no humanity in that. There's no exchange of I see you and this is who you are and this is who I am, right? And I especially feel it for all my sisters who are darker skinned. And you know, that's the thing. Like I recognize my light skin next to my dark skinned cousin. Just because of that, the interaction in a medical system will be different. And it angers me, right? It angers me that my cousin Tika can be sitting right here and you devalue her just because of something that she can't even control. And the way you service her will be different. While I'm not saying I'll get the best service, but there will be a difference. And how Black women have, oh, you know what's being birthed out of this though, Sophie J. Lots of Black women are going and pursuing doula certificates, right? We're coming back. We're coming back to ourselves to know that we have to decolonize ourselves. And just this dangerous medical environment and how the history of Black women being, you know, sterilized. And the young ladies that I work with in high schools that they're constantly being put birth control pushed on them. Even if they have like some emotional issues, a birth control is being pushed on. What does that have to do with, you know? Like if she's talking about, I just feel frustrated. I'm thinking about a young lady, a little 16-year-old. She's saying to her doctor that her mom takes her to, you know, I've been feeling real anxious and sad and depressed lately. And then you push birth control pills on her. Mm-hmm. So this is just a common thing. And I think the more we can educate ourselves and each other, and most importantly, I think about how do we educate service providers? How do I teach someone to see another human being as worthy? How do we do that? And so when I think about a lot of this work, it's really work for, and I don't think it's just white people, but I think that there's a call for us to look at who's providing the service, who's the nurse, right? Who's the doctor, who's the MD, who's the whatever. They're the ones that need the help. They're the ones that need the intervention. And how do we support? Because I think about if I go talking to Black women about this, like we know this, like this is, we like, oh yeah, that happened. I walked into the office, yeah, that you know, it's just kind of like, yeah, that happens. So who needs to be educated? Who needs to be talked to? Who needs to listen to something like this? And then really sit with themselves and say, like, well, what do I do when a Black woman walks in the room? You know what I mean, Sophie J? Like, if you think about I think about women or just white women that I work with. Like, what do you really feel when a Black woman walks into that space? Like to be able to go inside and look, that interchange equals social change, to look inside yourself and ask that question. I've been having these intimate kind of conversations with my department chair lately, as she's a white female. And I bought her this book. I got to remember the title, but it was about Dear Department Chair. It was a book written by 4 Black women in academia. And there's some things you need to know, right? So maybe we need to write a book that says, Dear Medical World by Black women. Here's some things you need to know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking of our audience right now, you know, anyone who wants to be a leader in this field that recognizes that there is a huge movement unfolding here. We all have a responsibility, and particularly the white women, me included, to do that inner work, to look for our own responses, our own unconscious biases that are going on. Because then when we go out in the world with our menstrual inspired work or menopause inspired work, the place that we're coming from is different, and the social change that we can create is different, and it can include more of us. And you want to know the most important part about that, Sophie J, is for white women to stop walking in spaces thinking they're the savior, or that there's this hierarchy and they know what these poor little Black bodies, these poor little Black, you know, these poor little children. Stop that. Like I've talked to groups like missionary groups that are coming into spaces thinking that you know what that space needs. How about you go in and sit and listen and observe and notice and feel and invite them and say, if I would like to support, but ask them what they need. Yeah, read and learn from all the amazing educators who are just tirelessly working to educate I'm thinking of educators of color here that are just there saying, come on, white women, this is the way. Like it's all there for us. I'll put lots of links in the show notes.
Oh, good. I have a book also. Carla D. Scott. She's a researcher in the language of strong Black womanhood. I like going to her work when I'm doing stuff with this because she just speaks, just very upfront. But there's also, here's this dynamic too, Sophie J. There's this space of like, as a woman of color, that I don't feel like educating you.
No.
Just like you can go at, so there's this space, but then on the other hand, I also need you to hear the story of me from me, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of like this space between, and I think about some of my yoga sisters out in the world who are just like, I'm tired. I don't want to keep teaching them. Like they need to figure out, they need to get it. And then there's some that are like, I still feel very strongly in that, like, who better to tell my story than me? And so it's like this battle all the time is like, I'm tired, like figure it out. But then also, nobody can tell my story except me.
Some more paradox.
Yes.
And that also speaks to me. I've got so much to learn here. It's not like I'm saying like I've got any of this down. I am on a huge process of learning and will be for my whole life. But pay the educators that you're learning from.
Oh man.
It's just there's so much emotional labor that's happening from Black and brown women and educators. Like let's support them, uplift them.
As I do the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work, there is always this call for we got to bring someone in. And then my question usually would be, well, what type of budget do you have? And sometimes, often, Sophie J, well, that's not really in the budget, but we need to cover it because of this, this, and this. I often get that. Well, that's not in the budget. However, that's required. We have to do it because, and it's just an interesting space. And I think the way that I walk in that is that I'm honored that I live this life out, and I'm honored that I've studied it. And I just really choose to walk in it with wisdom, and choose to make sure I don't let capital be the thing that drives me, but also please honor the work that I'm doing, right? Please exchange, offer something in exchange for that. It's a tricky space for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel mama coming through you again when you say that, I feel her strength, because still in the face of all of that, let's just name what it is, bullshit. You are going, right, I'm going to bring wisdom. I'm not going to collude with this capitalist system that is screwing things up for so many and just keeping a few on top. And I need to claim well, no, your worth, but
Yeah.
I need to receive
Yes.
value for the value that I'm giving.
There it is. That's it. You know what my daughter told me one time, Sophie J, as I was doing something. She was like, Mom, you worth more than free. You know that, right? Like you people should be like what you bring, Mom. Like I had to, like my child had to tell me this. I know my worth. However, there is that battle of capital and just me feeling like I really truly feel like I show up and I bring what I've studied, I bring the information, and that the money or compensation will come. Like I'm not chasing it. I just show up in my light, and then all that needs to be given to me or returned to me, that will come. I want to believe that. I want to live that out. I don't want to go chasing it. I don't want to say, oh, I got to do this for this much and I got to do this. I want it to be, I am truly living in my creative powers, and I'm sharing with this world this life, this light that is given to me. And I will be, the compensation will occur, the exchange will occur so that I can sustain, right? Yeah. And I remember learning that from you early. It must have been a year or two ago, about the sustainability in that exchange.
And not to rush in as a white savior, but I hear that and I go, my heart just moves to, and I want to dismantle the systems that are getting in the way of that flow for you.
Yeah.
That's the human to human.
And that's it. And how do we dance in that, where you have like a white female working with a Black female, and there isn't this energy of savior energy, but just, sis, I want to walk with you. right? Like, how do we, I feel like for me personally, I want to honor that. Even, I mean, let's look at it this way. Here's the thing, the privilege that I stand in. I live in a country where I have access to resources. And so when I go in spaces where there is an abundance of resource and I want to walk alongside someone, that I'm privileged. As an able-bodied person, I am privileged. You know, like, I'm not a savior to anybody else. And because I have degrees, I am privileged. It gives me access. So how can I walk alongside somebody, recognize that I'm not their healer, that I just create, you know what I do? I create a vibrational state that supports what they want. I always go, what is it that you want? Because I hope to create this climate, this vibrational space, this state that you can get to what you want, right? And that's true belonging, sister. You're my sister. You hear me say, this is what I want, Sophie J. And can you support with some type of climate or atmosphere that I can get to what I want?
And I'm hearing you on the climate and atmosphere, and there are policies that need to change.
Yes.
And in a protest against white supremacists, I want my body to be in between them and you.
Yes. And that's the part of like us looking at this is life, right? Because as you just described, your body being in between, I want my body to be in that space of when I think about children and, you know, when I think about a Black man that can't get out of his car without being profiled, when I think about young babies, like I want my body to be in between, right? Like we all have that, right? And it's funny because I start thinking just now, Sophie J, I think I want my body to be in between all those. It don't matter who it is. I just want my body to be where love is needed.
Yeah, like Mama's body was with those children. They show
Yes.
up with their nervous system dysregulated, and she's sitting there, she knows herself, she
Yes.
breathes, and they find their way back to themselves by being on her body.
It happened over and over and over again, Sophie J. I just remember sitting in the room and the tears and the way the kids would come in. Like, just think about that experience as a child. And I knew, I observed. So that's to me, like, for me, life and how precious life is. Like, I've seen some things that just people couldn't imagine, but me seeing that has definitely softened my heart into just really wanting to be loved. To see little children come into a house, all they want is their mama. And my grandma used to say this. She said, I don't care what that woman did, if she beat that child, if she starved and whatever, she said, no matter what, a baby still want their mama. No matter what. That's what she always said. Even if she had a child live with her for a decade, she said, I had to come to accept no matter what I did, there's something in them that connects them back to their mama, that they will always want something, some type of approval, some type of love from her. Right. And I love that. I love that we as humans get to have that.
I could talk to you all night, but that feels like a really beautiful place to close. Is there anything from Mama that you wanted to share to complete today?
I feel about that all of us have someone in our life that represents like some mother, some mama energy. And if we don't, can we sit and just really feel into that? Even I remember thinking that just because somebody isn't our elder or older, is a woman, that they can't provide this mothering energy to us. And I feel about that we all need some mothering. We all need mothering. And just, even if it's just girlfriend and girlfriend, like I experienced the mothering from you, you experienced the mothering from me. I just feel about, because of what I know and have felt, that we all need mothering. Like, may we find those people that have mothered us and just say thank you, right? Even if they were younger than us, right? And that's I'll end with that, because Mama was big on gratitude. She said, just say thank you, girl. Just, it don't matter. Just say thank you. Wake up and say thank you. You know, she said, get up and just say thank you.
Oh, I'm taking so much from today, and that is the cherry on top of a very wonderful cake. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've shared. Thank you, Mama. And it's just been a joy to be with you. Thank you, Cre.
Thank you, sister.
Enjoy heaven over there.
Listen, Sophie J, I'm about to get out here into heaven. I'll send you some love. Okay.
Mwah. Speak to you soon.
Yes, sister. See you later.
Thanks for being with us all the way through to the end. If you haven't already, please follow the podcast, subscribe, like, leave us a review. It all helps to get this work out to more people. And if there's anyone who you think would enjoy this conversation, would benefit from this conversation, please forward it to them. And that's it for this week. I'll be with you again next week. And until then, keep living life according to your own brilliant rhythm. Hey, thank you so much for being with us all the way through to the end. If you've enjoyed this conversation, head over to the show notes, redschool.net/podcast. I've shared lots of different links to people that Cre mentioned, to different Black and educators of colour, to the Harriet Tubman film. So it's really worth going and exploring all of those different links. And if you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, would love to hear about this, then please forward it to them. Please like and follow, subscribe, leave a review for the podcast. It all helps to get this work out to more people. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, that's it for this week. I'll be with you again next week. And until then, keep living life according to your own brilliant rhythm.